The United Kingdom and pheasant shooting and grouse shooting and bird shooting, they're essentially synonymous with one another when it comes to hunting. And it's essentially a pastime that dates back hundreds of years. And yeah, I get it, right? I get the fact that it's quote unquote elitist. And you're not wrong. It is. But you cannot argue with the value that goes into the conservation of those habitats for those activities, okay? Without game bird shooting, without game bird releasing, those habitats would not be what they are today. Their conservation status would not be what they are because of the habitat management that goes into them. If you take that away, if you take away game bird shooting, game bird releasing, you can essentially say goodbye to those habitats because something has to make a profit on those lands, right? Cows, forestry, agriculture. And then let's not talk about additionally all of the other jobs that come from it, right? The beaters, the picker-uppers, the hoteliers, the pub owners, the estate managers, you name it. Probably all gone because you can't release game birds anymore. Or you make it so onerous that people don't want to release game birds. And that's what the Welsh government essentially is doing right now. They've put out a consultation for game bird releases and potential licensing and regulations around those releases. And so you've got to ask yourself the question, why? Why do they feel the need to regulate and license these game bird releases? So the Welsh government has opened a 12-week consultation period for pheasant releases and red-legged partridge releases. And their why is the potential environmental impact of those releases. That's very, very interesting. And it should give you a little bit of pause when you start actually thinking about it. The specific language is to add both these birds to Part 1 of Schedule 9 of non-native species that occur in United Kingdom or specifically Welsh habitats and ecosystems. And more specifically, pose a conservation threat to native flora and fauna, essentially their biodiversity. So what could be the devastating environmental impact of these releases on the landscape? Is it the increased scratching of the dirt of these birds? Or maybe the fact that they will decimate the insect or hexapod population? You got to remember that both pheasants and red-legged partridges are omnivores, i.e. they pretty much eat anything, seeds, grains, insects, you name it. So you got to ask yourself, is there truly an environmental impact from the release of these game birds? So these birds are being released specifically for shooting, right? They're not just being released haphazardly and for fun. They're being released to hunt. So you have to imagine, in terms of the economic investment on the birds being released, that 90% of those birds, and that is a hypothesis, it's an assumption based on economics, that 90% of the birds are going to get shot. So there's probably 10% of the birds left on the landscape, all right? So would those 10% have a detrimental environmental impact on the ecology, on the habitat, on the biodiversity? The answer is an unequivocal no. Because let's break down that remaining 10%. Of the remaining of those 10%, how many do you think survive? Half. Let's just say 50%. So 5% of the release of those birds actually now are remaining on the landscape. How many of those 5% will then make it to a point where they breed and proliferate on the landscape? You're probably thinking maybe 1%. I would think that is probably an appropriate number. I would say that 1% of birds escape release, survive, and reproduce. So is that percentage great enough to have the entire industry regulated from a game bird release perspective? I think the answer is pretty clear. The ecological impact that these regulations are being promulgated on is a very, very thin veil for the reason for why they want to do something like this. The last thing I'll say is that, yes, we absolutely need to be cognizant of protected sites, sites with incredible biodiversity, and how those are potentially impacted with game bird releases. But those protecting sites are already under significant safeguards through the consenting regime. So what's the deal here? So if you're nodding north-south saying, man, that makes complete sense, logically it makes sense, then I need you to help the United Kingdom. I need you to engage with BASC, B-A-S-C, the British Association for Shooting and Conservation. You can log into their website, you can see all the information, you can see how you can help, you can fill out a form and submit your comments, and really anyone in the world can help BASC right now in responding to this idea that game bird releases should be regulated and licensed. The rationale that these releases are creating a significant environmental impact is a little nonsensical. So go help them, check out BASC, and see what you can do.